Ray, if someone asks if you are a god, you say yes. Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 73 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about horse dancing. My name is Nathan Pottle and thank you for joining me today. It's been kind of a crazy last week or so. I didn't do an episode last week just because of starting my new job and things like that. And we are also today we're babysitting for a couple friend of ours, so we have a 5-month-old sleeping upstairs. Hopefully she stays that way. If you hear any kind of noise in the background or anything like that, it's just the shrieks of a young child. So I'm not gonna worry about it though. She's supposed to sleep for about an hour, and it takes me less than that to record. So I'm down here recording right now. And before I get into today's topic today, it's such an exciting time. I'm very excited about movies right now, and I have things to talk about. So the next few episodes are going to be all reviews. Next week is going to be Tenet. I'm seeing it on Thursday, and I cannot wait. By the time this episode comes out, I will have already seen it, but from the time I see it to the time I release episodes, there's not enough time for me to really think about a movie and do a full review. So that'll be next week. And then the week after that, we'll have a review for New Mutants, which I'm very excited about as well. This movie was supposed to come out like 2 years ago, and we're finally getting to watch it. It's been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. But there was a while there that I was convinced that New Mutants actually wasn't a movie, and just a bunch of actors got together for a weekend and said, hey, let's just film some random footage and say we're making a movie, and like pulling a joke on everybody. But we're finally at the release of this film here, and I can't wait. And then the week after that, we're going to have Mulan on Disney+. So I'll be watching Mulan and let you guys know if it's worth the $30 on Disney Plus or not. So a lot of good stuff to be excited about for movies here. I, for one, am really excited, and especially because it's been so long since we've had brand new movies that I can review. I've been doing some reviews of older stuff and things like that. So now that we have this almost embarrassment of riches, movies that we get to go see and get to talk about that are brand new, seeing for the first time, I'm very excited about it all. So that's what's coming up in the next few weeks. Today, though, I'm talking about war movies, and this is because I've rewatched a couple recently and have been thinking about there are some really good war movies out there. So I wanted to do my top 5 favorite war movies. I've got 5 of them here. That's how top 5 lists work. You write down 5 of them, and I'm just going to talk about them a little bit. Highly recommend them. Obviously, these are war movies, so they are violent to one extent or another. Some more than others. I will let you know what's more violent than some of the other ones. Also, I usually forget to include spoiler warnings. So for all of these movies, I'm going to be talking about spoilers for all of them. Some of them aren't super new though, so I don't know. I'm just talking about spoilers. I just talk about movies, and unless I'm doing an exact review, I generally don't mention spoilers anyway. But it's good to mention, as if I ruin a movie for someone, I don't want to be that person. So here we go. I've got five war movies that I'm going to talk about. So why don't we start with number 5? And this movie came out in 2016, and it is called Hacksaw Ridge. Now, this movie is directed by Mel Gibson. Whatever you think about him in real life or not, the man can direct a movie. He is a very capable, talented director, and Hacksaw Ridge is probably my favorite of his movies that I've seen. Obviously, there's The Passion of the Christ and Braveheart, which won Best Picture. The Man Without a Face, I think he directed that one, and then Apocalypto, which is kind of a weird out there one. But Hacksaw Ridge, this is kind of all of his talents coming together. This one is the most violent of all of the movies. It really emphasizes the horrors of war, and that's really meant to be a reflection on our main character's story. So this is based off of a true story, and Andrew Garfield plays the main character. Can't remember his name right now, but basically his religion forbids him from doing any kind of violence, and he does not want to commit violence at all. He wants to go into the army to be a field medic and to help people and help his country win World War II, right? So he enlists in the army, and he's like, I am not picking up a gun. I'm just not doing it. He's a conscientious objector. Conscientious, that's a hard word to say. Conscientious objector. I do believe he was the first one of his kind in the United States Army, and so basically they had to let him go into war without a gun, which is kind of crazy that you would want to do that, but that's what he did. And so he goes into war, and basically it's the story about how he saves all of these people and like doesn't fire any weapons, but is still a war hero. And it's a fascinating story. It's quite a long movie. I do believe it's over 2.5 hours. And also, it takes a while for us to even get to the war. We spend a really good chunk of time with Andrew Garfield and his girlfriend slash wife. And the first chunk of the movie really focuses on their relationship, but also Andrew Garfield's relationship with his dad. And his dad fought in World War I. And we kind of see how that really affected his father, and not only affected him as a person, but affected him and his relationship with his son. So Andrew Garfield and his dad have this strained relationship, and it has flashbacks about when he first came back from war, and it really cements in the fact that like war is awful. It's not good. You don't want to go there. You do it because you have to. And then the next chunk of the movie after that is kind of him at his training camp, where we meet a lot of the other characters, the people that he's going to end up saving. And Vince Vaughn is in this movie, and he really, really nails his character. There's a little bit of comedy there. Vince Vaughn, I think, is mostly known for comedies. He's been in some dramas. But in this movie, he really turns out a good performance. I liked him a lot. Coming away from the movie, I remember his character and his performance and the things that he does. He's a captain or a general. He's in charge in some respect. I'm not really familiar with hierarchy of people in a military or in an army. I don't know like what's the lowest, what's kind of mid-range, and like higher up you go. I know colonel is important. I think a private or lieutenant is near the bottom. I'm not 100% sure, but Vince Vaughn's character is kind of in charge in some respect, and he trains them, and then he takes them out to Hacksaw Ridge, which is this place in Japan that has just been impossible to take over, and they're just fighting the Japanese. And when we get to the war is really, really when this movie cranks it up a notch, because the violence is insane. And I remember when this movie came out, a lot of people were really negative on the fact that how violent this movie is. It's saying it's glorifying war as opposed to saying how awful war is. Now, I don't see it that way. I see it as showcasing the horrors of war in order to cement the fact that our main character's line of thinking is correct, in order to sympathize with him and how he feels about carrying a weapon and using weapons. So when we're at Hacksaw Ridge and Andrew Garfield is fighting for his life, well, not fighting, when he's saving lives and just trying to rescue everybody, it like the stakes feel really high, and people are dying, and they're dying in horrible ways, and it's, oh my goodness, it's so good. And the way that it's shot and the way it's directed, by the time you get to the war, you understand what's at stake, not only just in a physical sense, but from a philosophical sense. Like what everything that this character believes is really being tested, and he has to face that head on. And Andrew Garfield gives an amazing performance. He's a really underrated actor, I feel. He's in The Social Network, and he's really, really good in The Social Network. He was Spider-Man, but all the problems with those Spider-Man movies are not his fault. It's the fault of studio interference. But we're not talking about the problems with those Spider-Man movies. Maybe I'll do an episode on them someday. I was thinking about it the other day. But he's such a talented actor, and I don't think he's given enough credit. So here in Hacksaw Ridge, Andrew Garfield is really spectacular, so that's why it's number 5 on my favorite war movies. I'm going to move on to number 4. Number 4 is Dunkirk from 2017. This is directed by Christopher Nolan. This was his last movie. His new movie, Tenet, is coming out on Thursday. Very excited about it. I mentioned it at the top of the show. We're not going to focus on that too much. What I'm going to say about Dunkirk right off the bat, and I may have mentioned it on the show before, but this is probably the best edited movie I've ever seen. It really showcases time in a really interesting fashion, because you're seeing things play out across different lengths of time across the movie, and so things are overlapping and crossing over between these different storylines, but it always makes sense. It's always perfectly clear what is going on, and as you're watching it, you really get that payoff of, oh, I've seen this part of the story already, and now it's coming to fruition here in this part of the story. It's fascinating. Now, Dunkirk is also based off of a true story. It's about some soldiers who are trapped on the Dunkirk beach, which I believe is in France, and they are completely trapped by the Germans. They cannot get out. Pretty sure this is in World War One. And then what ends up happening is that all of these ships from across the English Channel come over, and these are just civilian ships, and civilian ships are on their way to rescue these people on the beach. So we get 3 storylines that we're following within this film. We get the soldiers on the beach who are trying to escape and waiting to be rescued and that stuff. We get people on the boat who are coming across the English Channel, and that's Mark Rylance's character. And oh my goodness, Mark Rylance is such a delight. He's a very cute old man, if I'm allowed to say that. He's a very cute old man, and he's just charming. Actually, I'm going to use the word charming instead of cute. He's a delight to watch when he's on screen. I like Mark Rylance quite a bit. And then we have the characters in the Spitfires, and they are flying around and shooting down enemy ships and things like that. And that's where Tom Hardy's character comes into play. So we have these 3 different storylines that are going on at the same time, but they're carrying across over a different amount of time. Now, I don't want to really get into that too much. I want you to experience that for yourself. If you haven't seen Dunkirk, I highly recommend it. Another thing that I want to mention about this movie is that there's not a ton of dialogue. It's just a lot of visual storytelling, and you get little pieces here and there, especially the people on the beach. When we see things happening on the beach, it's almost all visual. I think we are about 10 or 15 minutes into the movie before even a single word is spoken, or like a word of dialogue. I think you hear people shouting and things like that. But dialogue as far as plot goes, I don't think you hear anything until about 10 or 15 minutes in. And that's one thing that I can really appreciate, is when a director can tell a story without having to hit you over the head with dialogue and things happening. You're just watching. Movies are such a visual medium, and it drives me crazy when people are on their phones during movies, because you need to watch it. It's a movie. Put your phone down and watch the movie. So when you're experiencing this visual storytelling, you're a lot more immersed, I feel, than if you're just being told things through dialogue. And it really is the mark of a great filmmaker. I do think that Christopher Nolan is a really excellent director. What he's really good at is explaining like high-end concepts for average audiences to understand. But in this movie specifically, he's really good at telling a story visually. And I think that's kind of what the goal was here, and he nailed it. One more thing about this movie that I really want to emphasize is the Spitfire sequences. So I love airplanes and aeronautics, and Christopher Nolan loves IMAX cameras. So the shots of the Spitfires in the air in IMAX was magnificent. Now, I'm pretty sure I've said so before, but I had the opportunity to watch Dunkirk in theaters on 70mm IMAX film, and it is probably in like the top 5 best theater experiences I've ever had of watching a movie. It just looked so good, and you could just feel the story. The sound is louder, the picture was amazing, it was wonderfully shot. IMAX cameras are spectacular, and I like them a lot. Now, Christopher Nolan is very adamant on always using film and never shooting on digital. He's very much a traditionalist in that sense. I don't always 100% agree with how extreme he is on that feeling. Same with Quentin Tarantino. But I can't deny the results that he gets. Everything that he shoots looks fantastic. And so that's why Dunkirk is number 4 on my list of favorite war movies. We're going to move on to number 3. This is the oldest of the movies on this list. This is The Bridge on the River Kwai. It came out in 1957. This movie did win Best Picture the year that it came out. It stars Alec Guinness. If you don't know who Alec Guinness is by name, he plays the original Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. So he was in this movie 20 years before Star Wars came out. And this movie is interesting because it's not so much about war, but about prisoners of war. So the story is that in World War II, Alec Guinness and his crew, his branch of the army, are captured in Japan, and they're prisoners of war. And they are being forced to build this bridge, which will like connect to a train, and then the train comes across this bridge and it's able to bring supplies and everything to this army camp. And Alec Guinness is like, no, forget it. We are not building this bridge. We are prisoners of war. We can't be forced into labor based off of some kind of labor code. And the leader of the Japanese prison camp is saying, no, you have to build this bridge or we're going to kill you and we're going to torture you and all these different things. So this Japanese leader is kind of crazy in the way that he does things and the way that he reacts. He's a little bit off balance mentally. And what ends up happening is it becomes a really interesting story about the psychology of war and what war does to your mind and how you can start to see and feel things differently based off of your experiences in war. It really gets into the psychosis of soldiers and just what happens to them. There's not a lot of combat in this movie. We don't really see any actual fighting until the end of the film, and even then, it's not very much. It's all about the characters. This is not a huge, sweeping, battle-filled story. It is like 2 hours and 45 minutes long, but it's about the characters, and it really takes the time to dive deep into how they think and how they feel and why they do the things that they do, and I found it absolutely fascinating. Alec Guinness is spectacular in his role of Colonel something. I can't remember the character's name, and I don't have my phone on me to look it up. I think I left it upstairs. I'm not 100% sure where it is, to be honest, but that's fine. All you need to know is that Alec Guinness is spectacular, and go into this movie knowing that there's not a lot of combat. You're not going to see a lot of action in this movie. It's a thought piece. You sit down and you watch it and you think about what's going on, and are these characters right in what they're doing, or are these characters right in what they're doing? Like, what is going on and what is happening? I do think that there's a little bit of issues in clarity in this movie, a little bit towards the beginning, because William Holden, who is in Sunset Boulevard, one of my favorite movies, William Holden's character escapes from this prison camp, and we don't really know exactly how he did that, or maybe I wasn't 100% paying attention at that point in the movie, but he escapes from this camp, and then he's working with the British military to try and rescue the rest of these prisoners, and it's a little unclear exactly on how some of this stuff unfolds, but overall this movie is extremely strong. It's really worth watching, and that's why number 3 on my list is The Bridge on the River Kwai from 1957. You should definitely check it out. I got it from my local library is how I watched it. I'm a huge proponent of using the library to get movies. I sometimes use it for books, not that often though, but use it for movies for sure. If the libraries in your town are open, I know some cities are not operating their public libraries right now just because of COVID and all that stuff, but if it's available to you, use that resource. Number 2 on my list is a movie called 1917, and this one came out last year in 2019. It's directed by Sam Mendes, and the cinematographer was Roger Deakins, and this is meant to look all like one camera shot. Now, I did do a full episode on this movie when it first came out, so if you want like a really in-depth analysis of what's going on in this film, feel free to go back and check out that episode. I actually think that episode turned out really well. It's one of the ones that I'm more proud of than other episodes. So go back and check that out if you want like really in-depth stuff. But this movie is really, really good. I didn't end up seeing it until earlier this year. Otherwise, it most definitely would have been in my top 5 favorite movies of 2019 when I did that episode. I hadn't seen it yet at that point. But oh my goodness, this is a movie phenomenal. It's basically about these 2 soldiers who are going off on a mission to stop an attack, because if the attack goes forward, they're going to run into an ambush and everyone's going to be just massacred. So they are on a timeline. They got to get to this place at a certain time in order to stop the attack. Otherwise, just bad things are going to happen. I think 2 full battalions. I think the stakes are something like 1,600 men will all die if this attack goes forward. And one thing that this movie does really, really well is the feeling of stakes. Like, you know that lots of lives are on the line, and if these guys mess up or don't make it, or if they die along the way, it's going to be awful. It's going to be a bloodbath. And I think what really helps lock in that feeling of stakes is two different things. The performances by the two main characters are fantastic. I do not know the names of the actors or of the characters they play. I think one of them is named Blake, Corporal Blake. Does that sound right? I think that's right. It doesn't matter. The two main characters are really excellent in their main performances, but also the musical score. I loved the score for this movie. It is dramatic and it is beautiful, and it really helps put you into that moment. And I think also the way that the movie is shot, because it's meant to look like all one camera shot, you are on the journey with them. You're not cutting away to different things. If the main characters don't know something, you don't know it. So you are surprised when they're surprised by something. There's one scene with a sniper who starts shooting at them, and you don't know that that sniper is there, but it's happening all of a sudden, and now the stakes are raised, and you gotta hide from the sniper because you're with these guys, and if you don't hide, you're gonna get shot, and then the mission is gonna fail, and everything is gonna fall apart. So 1917 is a really, really powerful film. I have watched it several times since my first watching of it. I got it on Blu-ray at home, and I am just enthralled by this film. The behind-the-scenes stuff of how they filmed everything is also incredible to watch. I recommend checking that stuff out too if you're at all interested in how movies are made, especially movies like this where it's meant to look like all one camera shot. Check out those behind-the-scenes features that people include on the Blu-rays and DVDs. It's just fascinating to watch. I'm sure you can find behind the scenes stuff on YouTube as well, but it's really worth checking out. It is really fascinating stuff. I only have one more movie left to talk about here, and I think it's a no-brainer. I think when most people talk about best war films of all time, this one is what comes to mind right off the bat, and that's Saving Private Ryan, which came out in 1998, and this is directed by Steven Spielberg. It stars Tom Hanks, Vin Diesel is in it, Nathan Fillion's in this movie, Matt Damon, a lot of really big names. Now, what this movie does in the respect of war that the other five in my list don't do is that this one is all about like brotherhood. We really see the bonds that people form with their fellow soldiers while they're at war, and like they'll defend each other, they'll die for each other, they will fight together, and that's what this movie focuses on a lot. And I really like and appreciate all of the effort that it goes through, but also at the same time it shows that even though that they're a brotherhood and they're joined together, they are also flawed individuals. And there's one scene in particular where a German soldier and an American soldier are fighting each other, and one guy is standing and watching and could help, but he's just petrified and terrified, and he's not really a soldier. I think he's like a clerk of some kind, and he is just frozen, terrified, watching this fight play out, and it's brutal. It's brutal to watch. It's so powerful of a scene. It's probably the best scene of the entire film because it's just so intense and so personal. This struggle between the German and the American soldier. It's my stomach is clenching just thinking about it right now because it is such an impactful scene. So just go into it knowing that you're gonna see things in this movie that will affect you deeply, and especially the opening scene of this film is the storming at Normandy, and it is a brutal fight. It is intense. It's one of the best battle scenes I've ever seen in a film. I think one day I'm going to do an episode on best battle scenes in films, and this one is definitely going to be on the list because it is intense and it's long and drawn out, and you know what's going on and which forces are going where and how everything is moving to turn the tide in this battle, and it is just like edge of your seat. What a way to open a movie. Well, it's not exactly the opening of the movie. We see some stuff in modern day in the 1990s with like a soldier looking at like all like the mass burial grounds of soldiers, and then it goes back to World War II, and then we see the storming at Normandy. It is, oh my goodness, these poor soldiers, the stuff that they had to go through. I sure do feel lucky that stuff like that isn't really happening today. I don't have to ship off to war and fight people. You know what I mean? We're not living in a time where there's a lot of conscription going on. Like, everyone is called to fight. It's like maybe we will be in a bit. Who knows what's going on, right? Like 6 months ago, I wouldn't have known that we would be in the middle of a pandemic, right? And I would not be able to leave my house. So who knows what the future has in store, right? But going back to Saving Private Ryan, the cast really has this form of brotherhood, and Tom Hanks especially gives a spectacular performance, because when does he not? He's Tom Hanks. But everyone else in the cast as well. And when they go off to find Private Ryan, I guess that is something I kind of skipped over of what the story of this movie is. Basically, this small team of soldiers are going off to find Private Ryan, because Private Ryan had 4 older brothers who are all dead, and they want to send Private Ryan home to his mother so that all 5 of her sons don't die from this war. And they're on this mission to go save Private Ryan. That's right, it's right in the title, Saving Private Ryan. And so then it's them going on this cross-country journey, and they run into some bad guys, and they do some fights and have some war, and people die, and all of this stuff. It's a really excellent film. It's also quite long. It's pretty violent, and just a spectacular movie. I am not alone in thinking that this movie should have won Best Picture when it came out. It lost to Shakespeare in Love. And that's just, it's awful to think about. I think that's going to be pretty much it for today's episode, though. I will run through my top 5 favorite war films one more time for you guys. Number 5 is Hacksaw Ridge. Number 4 is Dunkirk. Number 3, The Bridge on the River Kwai. Number 2, 1917. And number 1, Saving Private Ryan. So those are my favorite war movies. My question for you guys today is, what is your favorite war film? Is it one of these on the list? Is it something else entirely? Please feel free to let me know by reaching out. You can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter at PottleNathan. And you can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. You can also email the show. All of that stuff is in the show notes below. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It means a lot to me, and stay tuned for the next few weeks where we're going to be talking about brand new movies. I'm very excited about all of that. So thank you again, and as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.